Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining this week's Generation Digital Workforce. This is Zena coming at you from Austin, Texas. Thanks everyone for joining me this week. You're going to be super excited to join this week and hear from Neil Wright. Neil Wright's been with Blue Prism for about 12 years now and was the founder of the robotic operating model. Neil, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Zena, and I'm delighted to be with you today to talk more about the RPA market and the intelligent digital workforce that it has created. I started, as Zena said, many years ago, back in 2008. Some people have said that I am one of the founding fathers of the RPA market. I led a team initially of 5 people as we delivered the first 1,000 or so digital workers to organizations across the globe during the years, say, 2008 through 2015. We created the robotic operating model, which has been then used successfully by organizations across the planet to roll out their digital workforce at scale over the last few years. We've learned an incredible amount of that in that time. It's a truly exciting market to be in, and this is a really exciting time to be a part of it. So delighted to be here and delighted to answer any questions that you've got, Zena.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. So glad you could join us today. And I do think one of the founding fathers is an apropos title for you to take, being that you have been part of the RPA even before it was called RPA.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good perspective that you bring to us and looking at this market, this industry, if you will, as a whole. You know, if you take yourself back 24 to 36 months, you probably are seeing things happen today that you may have predicted, may not have predicted, but also probably are pretty exciting to you. Let me ask you to push us 24 to 36 months into the future. What is your prediction for what the digital workforce will look like 2 to 3 years from now? And how will businesses really be just fundamentally different because of this digital worker that doesn't exist in most businesses today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so let's start by first of all looking, where we're at the moment with digital workforces. Really, when we look at it, some of the biggest workforces across the planet, digital workforce across the planet, are only really hundreds of workers, right? These digital workers, which are these multi-skilled, multilingual resources that are available 24/7 and can be seamlessly assigned to processes across an entire organization in line with this business demand. At the moment, the vast majority of those digital workers are native to each organization. So they're installed on-premise. They're really focusing in pockets of those organizations. And they're primarily automating activities that are leveraging digital structured data. And that tells you a really important story of where we are in the maturity of the RPA market. Because actually what it tells you is that we're very early in the market. Although it's been around for a long time, it's brand new. As of 2 to 3 years ago, there was hundreds of customers of Blue Prism. Now there are thousands of Blue Prism customers. So that's thousands of companies that are using Blue Prism to build their digital workforce. That's hundreds of thousands of people that 2 or 3 years ago had never even heard of RPA and never understood the concept of a digital workforce. So if that's where we are now, let's look to the future. Well, every single organization, large-scale organization, has tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people working a whole series of different processes across their organization. So as we look to the future, what I predict is that we'll start seeing thousands of digital workers transcending all areas of enterprise organizations. We'll see a trend towards more and more of those digital workers being leveraged on demand from the cloud. And we'll start to see much more intelligence built in to the digital workforce as the AI hype curve moves through into the delivery, actually delivering real world solutions that are then embedded in the intelligent digital workforce. We're already starting to see that happen through our Blue Prism cloud offerings and our Decipher product offering. What do I mean by intelligence? At the moment, primarily, processes are digital structured data. The intelligence is really around structuring unstructured data and digitizing non-digital data. So think of a digital worker as if it was a human being. The RPA component that Blue Prism provides is very much about being the fingers on the keyboard. The intelligence that gets added to that is by adding things like the eyes to be able to see, which is what our Decipher product does. It adds the ears to be able to translate, say, voice to text. It adds a brain that can do cognitive thinking. It adds the legs, the workflow to move the work through the workplace. So that's what we mean by intelligence. Replicating all the attributes of a human worker, these key skills of a human worker, and replicating them into a digital worker. So as we look for that 24 to 36 months future, we're going to see increased number of digital workforce. We're going to see familiarity. People are going to start to work more and more with digital workers and become familiar with them. And what the digital workers will be doing is they'll be taking more and more of the administrative functions away from the human workforce, leaving the human workforce available to do more of the human-centric activities, the cognitive thinking activities, the relationship-based activities. Does that help paint a picture, Zena?
It really does help paint a picture. And one of the ideas that, I've been thinking about is, we're living in this time when the digital workforce is something that's new and unique, and we're actually calling it out, the digital workforce versus the human workforce. But I'm curious, how do you see this line blurring between human and digital workers over time? And do you see a point in the 24, 36-month future when hiring managers sit down to conceive of growing their team and actually having one of the questions be, am I adding a human or a digital worker? Can you tell us a little bit about what you see, how that line blurs, and we just end up at the workforce of the future versus this human versus digital workforce sort of paradigm that we live in today?
I think that's exactly right. As the presence of the digital worker becomes more ubiquitous in many organizations, then the human workers are going to culturally adopt the digital workers as they so that we'll see an increase in policies for digital workers. Okay, so the corporate policy handbook may well extend, so it's got the policies for how to onboard a digital worker as well as how to onboard a human worker. Humans are going to turn up to work in the morning grateful for the fact that the digital workers have been working all night to get work ready for them to action. Work such as that the humans can do, such as making calls to customers, building relationships with other humans, selling more corporate product, and increasing their personal productivity. All of these things start to then help the humans to do this cultural adoption of the digital workforce. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. So if you were a hiring manager today, how would you start thinking about organizationally how to incorporate a digital workforce into your team? How would you start thinking about that today, knowing that in 24 months from now, digital workers will be ubiquitous in the workplace? How, as a hiring manager, do I start thinking about that today?
Key thing to understand is what processes are suitable for automation for the digital workforce to take control of. How do you start empowering your human workforce to be the driving force behind what work gets given to the digital workforce. What objectives do you set your organization? What vision, strategy, goals do you set for your teams within the organization that says the future is the workforce, which is a blend of human and digital? Each bring their own skills to the party. The skills that the humans bring are around where relationships with other humans are required. So customer service, customer satisfaction, sales, that sort of thing. So that's where the humans can operate. What are the skills that the digital workers bring? These mundane tasks, these repetitive tasks, these areas where there's interpretation of text that's required, these areas where there's tricky invoices to read and extraction of data from those invoices. All these activities at the moment, the default thought process is either we'll throw more human beings at it, or we'll put a request on for an IT system that can be brought in, an IT program that can be brought in to change the system infrastructure to be able to accommodate that. What if there was a different way? What if the business teams became empowered to identify processes for automation and to have the technologies available to them to be able to actually configure those automations themselves? So looking at what does the workplace of the future look like, and if you're a manager trying to shape up ready for that, start thinking about how to understand what the different options are for process automation, what candidates you could use within your process landscape for automation. Start looking at what roles you need within the organization to understand the different technologies that are available to the business to be able to do this configuration of these and orchestration of these automation activities. So therefore getting the intelligent digital workforce to be operating these processes. These are some of the things that I see happening in the next 24 to 36 months. But there's many other things that I'm sure will happen alongside this. I'm trying to paint a picture of what we can sort of see is going to happen, and I'm just delighted that I'm going to be a part of the next 2 to 3 years and seeing how the potential that's here at the moment really starts to get realized, and we start to see the workforce of the future starting to take shape.
Yeah, it's super exciting, isn't it? One of the questions that I hear a lot of people looking for clarity around is the difference between what I will call a digital assistant and a digital workforce. You know, a digital assistant could be something that I have as a personal tool that I am able to expedite some of the things that I might do on a routine basis on my desktop. And so I might have a desktop assistant that helps me kind of speed up some of the work I'm doing. Can you help our audience understand what's the difference between that digital assistant, that individual productivity tool that somebody might have that helps them, versus what is a digital worker and a digital workforce for the business, and how those two things are fundamentally different?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really, really good question. So a digital assistant sits on your desktop and is actually redundant for a lot of the time. It sits there inactive. It's waiting for you to tell it what to do next. The digital worker is a centralized corporate asset. It's available 24/7. It can switch seamlessly between processes across the entire organization. So if it's not working on processes for you, it can be working for processes in other parts of the organization, in different languages, in different time zones. By having this corporate asset, that brings you the security, it brings you the control, and it brings the scalability to ensure that you as an organization, your organization, has full control over the digital workforce. You as an individual have full control over the digital workers that are performing the activities that you trigger for them to do. Does that help explain the difference, Ina?
It does explain the difference very well. And I think that it's a very important difference because as we begin to talk about the digital workforce generation and what it brings, we are looking to build an entire new capability within a business, not provide a personal productivity tool, which is one of the reasons why I really wanted to get that out in one of my first episodes as to what that difference was. You've already talked about some of the things that digital workers are good at and enabling, humans to do the things that we're better at. In your experience over the last 12 plus years now has it been, what is the coolest thing you've seen a digital worker do today? What's the coolest digital worker that you've met?
I've met a lot of digital workers. That's a really good question. I think for me, one of the coolest, because it really resonated with me, was we were primarily in financial services in the early days, where we implement most of our processes. And I'm from a financial services background, so I wasn't really surprised by a lot of the processes because I'd sort of been seeing them in my previous careers. One of our earliest customers that we brought in outside of financial services was actually a logistics company. And what they did is they had this really cool digital worker that could interpret the engine management warning signals that were being issued to the drivers. And by doing that, what they could do is they could tell the driver exactly what that driver needed to do next. As a direct result of implementing that process, that digital worker stopped all engine blowouts from happening in the following months after it was implemented. Because instead of the drivers continuing to drive to the next truck stop or drive on or misinterpret the instructions that were coming from the engine management system, the digital worker did that interpretation. The digital worker provided the instructions to the driver, and the digital worker reported to the head office what was happening. And that meant that the trucks were taken off the road before the engine issues got catastrophic. So a great example that sticks in my mind because it was the first time I'd really seen something outside of the standard financial services market being digitized, having a digital worker do it. And so I thought that was particularly exciting.
Oh, I love it. It's like your digital worker has become your air traffic controller for your big rigs. Love it. Super cool.
Exactly right, yes. That's right. Cool. And it actually now helps the same digital workers now actually help the truckers to avoid hurricanes. When hurricanes are coming in, they get hurricane warnings, bad weather, so they can avoid the areas as well. So again, saving considerable cost and considerable inefficiencies in the logistics chain.
Yeah, supply chain has probably got a ton of other applicable roles for digital workers. You want to share any other that comes to mind?
Yeah, another one again is related to logistics, which is air travel and the filling of the cargo hold, and a lot of the work that's around understanding how full a cargo hold is for the airlines, particularly the logistics ones, is by processes of spreadsheets, and so they have to allow some contingency in how full they get their cargo hold to allow for mistakes. They're never quite sure exactly what's in there. Well, now we have airlines that are actually doing the digital workers are actually monitoring exactly what is getting put in the manifest for the cargo hold. So now the freight providers can actually put more into the hold safely, knowing that they've got exactly the right weight and size in there. So what it does there is it increases the amount of freight that can be carried by those airlines for exactly the same cost.
Yeah, and the time and speed at which it does it is unparalleled to a human, and actually allows these carriers to change more quickly what cargo is going to go into the plane so that they can actually optimize their business. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Super, super cool. I had not actually heard that example, Neil. So you shared a new one with me, and I've been around 2 years. So super exciting. um, One of the things that I believe it's called the Institute of the Future of Work, I believe is the body of the organization. They put out a research study last year that said that 80% of jobs that primary school kids will take, when they turn 25, haven't yet been invented. I'm curious, do you have any insight into what human jobs haven't yet been created that will, because of the intelligent automation phase that we're living through right now?
Yes, indeed. We're already, what I can do is answer based on what I'm seeing already. And one really interesting role I'm already seeing brought into organizations is ahead of the future of work. So this is becoming a role now where people are looking at what does the workforce of the future look like? And this is an acknowledgement of these initial few thousand digital worker organizations that actually the future of work is changing. So we need a role to manage what that transition looks like. What are the skills that we're going to require as an organization moving forwards? What are the skills required to operate alongside the digital workers? What are the skills required to configure the digital workers and support those digital workers? So roles that we're starting to see emerge or can start to see the need for. Things like digital workforce team leader. So this is someone who really has ownership of hundreds of digital workers and is responsible in human terms, if you like, for their well-being, to make sure that the digital workers are being fed the work, that they are productive, that they're efficient and effective, and that their benefits that they're providing are articulated correctly through the management chain. So people can understand exactly what it is that the digital workers are doing, what the digital workers require in order to be able to do even more of what they're doing, and what the value is that's being returned to the organization as a result of the digital workforce.
Neil, that you just made me think of a question. Yeah. Can digital workers get sick?
Yes, they can.
They can. Because you said you need a manager to take care of them. So I'm like, well, do they get sick? Yes. Tell us a little bit about that.
And this is a really interesting dynamic. And as organizations start to culturally adopt the digital workforce, they see them more and more as human-like forms. And a great example of this is one of our customers that's been a customer since 2008, actually. And the way they talk about their digital workforce is if one of the digital workers is running slower than the others, right? They say that it is feeling sick, it is not feeling well, right? Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that it's got a cold or the flu. What it means is maybe the virtual machine that it is running on is actually not running fast enough for some reason, perhaps the network connectivity, or perhaps there's something in the memory of that virtual machine. So the well-being of a digital worker is related to the technology that provides the support to make sure that digital worker can operate. In the same way that the well-being of a human worker is really influenced by the technology that made our body, right? That is our body. Does that make sense, Zena?
Yes, it does make sense. I had never really thought about it before until you said that, digital workers needed managers for all sorts of reasons. And I'm like, well, they might need to call in sick, but they really wouldn't call in sick.
Yes,
but your description of it,
right.
Description of it explained it though, and makes it very clear.
And in that same vein, we do see that what customers start doing is they actually start naming their digital workers, right? And this again makes them feel more human, right? So they might, I've heard in the past phrases like, where the digital worker does some of the work, the team leader might say, oh yeah, we pass all of our boring work to Poppy. Poppy is just, it's a digital worker and it takes that work. But the way that the team thinks of it is that it's Poppy that is again, this is about the organization seeing it just as a single workforce, just as you described earlier on, Zena. It's just a single workforce. Poppy happens to do some of the work, the humans happen to do some of the work.
Why do you think, and maybe it's because, Neil, you and I are so part of this intelligent automation, revolution, if you will, movement, whatever word you choose to use, that we're living through, that it's not a fearful thing to me. But why do you think that this idea of digital workers does create some fear for some people? And, for me, a fear is a false expectation appearing real. So I always like to kind of give it that vernacular and something to look at, because if you think of fear as a false expectation of fear appearing real, then you can sort of take yourself out of it and try to see past it. But what do you think causes the fear that some workers have today when they hear of this intelligent automation or this digital workforce? Where do you think it's coming from, and how do you think we should help our human workers overcome that fear?
Yeah, and I get asked this question a lot. And for me, a lot of the fear is the fear of the unknown, right? The fear of the threat to people's personal roles. Now, I've been now 12 years operating in this community, and I've never seen anyone lose their job as a result of a digital worker taking on some of the activities. What I've seen is that people have taken on more interesting jobs. They've engaged more with other people. They've spent more time on the phone. They've had to spend less time translating information from a spreadsheet into a system and making a decision based on the criteria that has been defined for them to make that decision. The robot can do all of that. Let the human do the interesting work. So by thinking of it as, for a lot of it for me, is about explaining and evangelizing what a digital workforce actually means and what it means to the individual humans that are going to be working alongside that digital worker, and how that there's going to be a seamless interaction of activity between the human worker and the digital worker, and that there's always going to be a need for that human worker, and actually that human worker is going to be more satisfied with the role that they perform when the digital worker has taken the skills that the digital worker can do, and that the individual productivity of those individual human beings is going to increase, and the career progression paths are going to increase as these new roles open up within the organization. Roles such as, an intelligent automation engineer, let's call it, or a configurator, as some of our customers call it. So these are people sometimes straight out of college, without an IT background, who are able to create these automated processes by configuring multiple platforms, deliver rapid business value in this structured, controlled, and scalable manner through the digital workforce. So this is a fantastic opportunity for career progression, as well as an opportunity to have more excitement and more satisfaction out of the role that individuals perform on a daily basis in large organizations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It is the fear, the false expectation appearing real that there will be no more jobs for humans. But
Yes.
of course, with all of the industrial revolutions we've been through in the past, well, you and I are still here working, aren't we, Neil? I would be more than happy to let the digital workers take over, but not everybody is.
I think there's a long time yet.
It's going to be a long time coming. I agree. So.
Absolutely.
Super fabulous conversation here today. I do have one final question, if there's nothing else that you want to share with our audience.
Just to say, don't be afraid of the digital workforce. Embrace it. It's part of the future. It's early on in that future. So jump aboard the train now. Be a part of it, and be a part of taking the next industrial revolution through maturity.
Yeah, it's exciting to be a part of, and I also encourage all of our listeners out there to hop in and learn more and ride this wave. It is a lot of fun. And now
It certainly is.
It is. It is a lot of fun. And couldn't agree with you more. Everything you've said, Neil. Natural attrition sits at about 20% in most companies. All the customers I've worked with, I've asked them what their attrition due to automation is, and it, oftentimes is not even calculated, but would be in the very low percentages. Certainly nowhere near what natural attrition does for businesses. So it is a fear that is unfounded, but a good one for us to keep our eye on, and making sure that our human workers, do feel empowered by the digital workforce and how to really leverage it in their future business. So lots of exciting things. So I always like to end my episodes with what I call the Xena Zinger. It's just a fun question to end us on in a fun way. So we've talked a lot about the digital workers taking on human characteristics. You said that they could, get eyes and start to read, natural language processing and different human attributes, if you will. If a digital worker needed shoes, what kind of shoes would they wear and why?
The digital workers would wear sneakers. The reason that they would wear sneakers is because they need to be moving fast. They need to be moving fast to get through the processes. They need to be comfortable when they're operating fast, because they get everything right first time. And they need to be first past the post. How does that sound? That is a very good question.
I love it. Sneakers are my favorite kind of shoes. So I think that that's what they would wear too. They definitely wouldn't wear dancing shoes.
No.
Neil, thank you so much.
To me, Xena. I wear dancing shoes in this community.
Well, we do have to stay on our toes, so you never know. Neil, thank you so much for joining me today with the Generation Digital Workforce podcast. And I look forward to a future episode where I'll welcome you back.
And I look forward to it as well. Thank you very much, Xena.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Join us next time for Generation Digital Workforce.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.